You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 2nd of July 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Charvet. Coming up on today's programme, Ukraine's capital suffers one of the worst nights of the war. Monocle's Julia Jen, what can you tell us?
Well, Kyiv's residents are once again waking up to explosions, smoke in the air, flames, a dramatic attack with a rising death toll.
Thank you very much, Julia. More from you in a moment. After that, we do have news from the world of fashion in Paris. We'll speak to Monocle's editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, about Chanel's acquisition of Charvet. And Grace Charlton brings us news of a crackdown on fast fashion. Finally on the show, it is Thursday and the World Cup is in full swing. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, the global countdown this week, continues its own musical take on the tournament.
Absolutely. It's our fifth installment, and today we look at the number one songs in France, Senegal, Norway, and Argentina.
All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Charvet. A very happy Thursday to all of our listeners around the world. We'll start with Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, which has faced what Mayor Vitaly Klitschko and others called a most massive attack overnight, killing at least 13 people and injuring 90. Klitschko declared a day of mourning for tomorrow as Kyiv picks up the pieces from one of the most devastating strikes of an already devastating war. Well, Monocle writer-researcher, Ukraine expert Julia Jen joins us right here in the studio. Good to have you, Julia.
Good afternoon, Chris.
Just give us an overview, first of all, if you could, of what happened overnight.
So this was a pretty dramatic attack lasting over 11 hours. So Kyiv residents waking up to the sound of drones and that very eerie, very terrifying kind of sonic boom of rockets flying overhead that really chills the bones in a way that, you can't quite imagine until you've heard it. And the death toll is in fact rising as we speak. So the very latest figure from the mayor's office is 18 killed, which is just, risen really in the last few minutes. And of course, tens of people taken to hospital. We have images being beamed in from Kyiv of diggers sifting through rubble. So one of the main targets of this attack was residential buildings across Kyiv's suburbs. So we have one particularly dramatic image of a digger going through the rubble of a multi-story building. And we know that a 15-year-old girl is trapped underneath the rubble. So this is incredibly heartbreaking, incredibly dramatic stuff. And, just scrolling through Facebook where Ukrainians will regularly share updates, from their families and what people are suffering. I saw that family friends of ours, the charred remains of their apartment, luckily they're safe and they're alive. But things, very dramatic scenes like that. So, and I think one of the things that really strikes me every time I see these images coming in from Kyiv is the indignity. You build your apartment, you build your flat, and then it's just blown apart and the whole world sees kind of what you've put on your kitchen shelves or whatever. So it's a very dramatic morning in Kyiv.
It is extremely dramatic, and Russia, of course, will say that this is in response to what Ukraine has been doing, sort of attacking Russian energy installations. Russia claims it attacked energy installations in Kyiv as well, but as you say, the images certainly tell a very different story of what they were targeting. But will Ukraine have been expecting some sort of response like this from Russia, given what we've kind of talked about the last few weeks, Ukraine gaining the upper hand, taking the fight to Russia? I do understand Volodymyr Zelensky, at least last night, already said he was expecting this attack.
Absolutely. And actually, President Zelensky was in Ireland holding talks with the leadership there as they announced their EU presidency. And he cut his visit short because these intelligence reports were coming in about Russia gearing up for a mass attack on the capital and across Kyiv. So he actually flew home early to be there when this was all happening, to be able to coordinate a response. So Ukraine very much is expecting an escalation from Russia. And we've seen this covered in the major headlines across the world. Leaders really warning and actually kind of editorials really saying Russia really will ramp up now. Russia is humiliated. Russia is embarrassed. We actually had President Putin admitting for the first time this week to a public audience, and this was broadcast live from the Kremlin, really that, Russia is suffering as a result of Ukrainian attacks. And he said terrorist attacks, but we of course all know that these are Ukrainian drones. Absolutely. Russia's kind of escalation tactics really ramping up here, and a desperation, a real urge to break kind of Ukrainian morale, to disrupt daily life as much as possible. And there are psychological effects that this is unfortunately having an effect on the Ukrainian people. So we know that last time I was on the radio here, we were talking about Ukrainian-Polish diplomatic relations really being under strain. And this is kind of another blow to, I think, those diplomatic relationships. For example, Ukrainians feeling like they are under this particular violent attack, but then not having that level of understanding between them and their European allies. And I think really putting strain on the entire kind of military alliance that's propping up Ukraine, propping up their struggle against their kind of fight against Russia, and Russia really trying to exploit that psychological weakness that they can create.
Well, on that psychological point, I mean, we've talked also on this show before, Julie, about the fact that with Trump coming into office, some of the restrictions on Ukraine were basically lifted in the sense that Trump just didn't really care as much. So Ukraine was able to strike deeper inside of Russia. When you look at this kind of response that we're now seeing from Russia, this escalation, is that likely to give Ukraine any pause for thought in terms of its own attacks on Russian energy installations? Also, potentially, there are reports they might target Russian tankers.
I think that, in fact, Ukrainians are seeing that actually they're having success here. I mean, to get President Putin to admit to a public audience that there are problems, serious problems in Russia as a result of Ukrainian attacks, absolutely. I think Ukrainians will keep pressing to that advantage. So both sides really trying to maneuver what kind of cards they have, if we're to use Trump's language. And we know that, for example, President Zelensky being in Ireland, one of the things that would have been top on the list of topics to discuss would be the shadow fleet that Russia uses to transport their sanctioned oil around the world, sanctioned gas and oil, and they make their way through Irish waters. Ukraine has been arguing, or has its argument that legally it should be allowed to attack these shadow fleet tankers. That was made public in the last few days. So Ukraine really arguing its case for allowing it to operate in international waters to target these shadow fleet tankers. And we have seen that actually in the last few hours, the Institute for Strategic Studies here in London, they released a report saying that this shadow fleet, Russia's shadow fleet, is being used to launch drones. So we've seen so many of these drone incidents in the last few months, drones circling around Copenhagen Airport, air bases, submarine bases in Europe, disrupting European life, but kind of this mysterious element. I'm not sure who the actor is. The Institute for Strategic Studies arguing that, in fact, this is Russia mapping European air defences. So I wonder how much more weight, now that that study has come out, I wonder how much more weight Ukraine's argument will be with their shadow fleet. But absolutely using that kind of card, that to its advantage. Currently, Ukraine is sort of operating in the shadows here. When there is an attack on a Russian shadow fleet tanker, which there has been off the coast of Spain, for example, off the coast of French territories, then we have seen Ukraine not publicly acknowledging that they are behind this, although of course we can understand them. We can understand who will be motivated to attack these vessels. But yes, Ukraine really pressing home their advantage in those areas.
Monocle's Julia Jen, thank you very much for joining us for that today. Now here's Thomas Waterhouse with today's other news headlines.
Thanks very much, Chris. The US has signed a deal to construct a new permanent embassy complex in Jerusalem. Israel says the development reflects the unbreakable alliance between the two countries. This new embassy will be built at the Allenby compound in the south of the city. Israeli rights group Adalah has criticised the plans for the site, which it says is land confiscated by Israel from Palestinian landowners. Japan has tripled its international tourist tax for all foreign visitors and Japanese nationals leaving the country. The levy, also known as the departure tax, has been raised to 3,000 yen, or nearly $20 to combat over-tourism. The move comes just days after the price for a short-term tourist visa was increased fivefold. The country saw over 42 million inbound tourists last year. And thousands have flocked to the British Museum's website in the hope of securing a ticket to see the Bayeux tapestry. On the opening day of sales, 80,000 people were in the online queue, with the peak wait time being roughly 9 hours in the afternoon. The 11th century tapestry is returning to the UK from France for the first time in nearly 1,000 years. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Thomas. The French luxury powerhouse Chanel is acquiring one of France's most storied fashion brands in Charvet, the world's oldest shirt maker dating all the way back to the 1830s. Well, to tell us more about this, I'm joined now from Paris by Monocle's chairman and editorial director, Tyler Brûlé. Tyler, we're talking here about the merging of two giants of French fashion and luxury.
I wouldn't quite call it a merger, Chris. It is an acquisition. So I think that we have to make that sort of clear from the start. But this is really the big news as we enter, of course, the next half of this year. It is something which has really sort of lit up all of the front pages, not just of the French press, but of course the trade press as well. Charvet is, on one side, yes, it is a fashion brand, but it is much more. It is really institution when it comes to, of course, shirt making, when it comes to neckties, when it comes to having the most wonderful robes, the best slippers. It is really known for a very, very particular space. It is a gentleman's brand, much loved by women as well, I would say, of course, when it comes to, of course, shirt making, when it comes to, of course, having, the most luxurious, most sought-after slippers. It does have a feminine base, but it is squarely a menswear brand. It is a menswear business. That is how they've really built their international following. And what's interesting about Charvet, their position just near Place Vendôme in Paris, is that it's a place of pilgrimage. This is, people come from Riyadh, they come from Abidjan, they come from New York because they want, of course, fantastic shirts. They want, of course, amazing nightshirts. And then, of course, just this amazing array of handkerchiefs and neckties. And this is what the business is known for. And of course, it has been a target for so long. So many private equity companies, of course, you can imagine the competitors of Chanel, the likes of LVMH. Everybody has been after this brand, Chris. So it's quite big news that finally Chanel has managed to snatch this business up.
Well, absolutely. And as you kind of lay out there, Tyler, I mean, Charvet is the one with the storied brand, but Chanel is the one doing the acquiring. It is the bigger brand. What does Chanel want to do with this, do you think? Are they seeing an opportunity here in menswear particular that maybe they didn't have?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, one, we saw a glimmer of this, and I have to say there was, I'm not saying that this was a horse that we were sort of backing or betting on, but there was certainly a sense when we saw, of course, when Mathieu Blazy came in, of course, as the new creative director for Chanel, we saw that there was, a Charvet shirt came down the runways, and this was a very sort of interesting, sort of telling collaboration. Was it a one-off? Were those conversations happening? Of course they were. What's interesting is that the ink only dried on this deal probably a little 36 hours ago. It is incredibly fresh. They probably knew they couldn't keep a lid on it. Hence, that's why the release came out at 7 o'clock Paris time here this morning. But I think to the bigger question, which is one around the topic of menswear, this is certainly an area where, and this is curious actually, if you go into a Chanel store still, Chris, you can the only piece of menswear that Chanel does, it's neckties, and this is a curious thing. But otherwise, Bruno Pavlovsky, the president of Chanel, has been very clear. Chanel is a women's wear brand. Of course, you've seen, many, I would say, the fashion obsessed, many men who want to wear a Chanel jacket, who might carry around a Chanel bag. That is not their core business. That is not where they want to be. I'm sure they're happy to have those customers. So Charvet opens up a whole new world for them. It allows them, of course, to certainly maintain and power ahead. Chanel, of course, being in this extraordinary position as a luxury goods business right now. But Charvet gives them this whole other world under a different label, not, you would say, sort of impacting or maybe polluting Chanel, and gives them, of course, does this become another 25 billion or 20 billion plus business? Maybe not. But can they actually take an interesting space right now where they've not been and power ahead from there? Absolutely.
Well, that's also the question I had, Tyler. I mean, even if they keep Charvet as a separate brand, as we assume they will, what do you expect them to actually do with it? Are they going to sort of, lean into the heritage of this brand and keep it as it is? Or do you think they have plans to sort of shake things up at Charvet?
I think they wouldn't want to touch many aspects of it because, of course, Chanel, they're famous and they push forward with this notion of the métier d'art, the various houses that they already own when it comes to manufacturing. So I think one thing for sure is that suddenly you have know-how, you have savoir-faire when it comes to of course, shirt making, tie making, and all of the, of course, Chanel does, of course, great work with silk already, but then there's different techniques which Charvet has. So it's how do you build upon that? And of course, this is an acquisition which, I'm not here with a business plan or a roadmap for them, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't want to go to Tokyo, to Hong Kong, to New York, with a bigger Charvet story. And of course, as we said, it's a very narrow, focused brand. It's not a place where you're going in and buying a trouser. It is not a place where you're going in and buying luggage, or it's not sort of the predictable world of what we've seen with luxury goods houses. So I think, Chris, that they'll be very considered. This is a company which is never in a rush. This is a private company, so it's not that they're having to, of course, go and talk to the street every day. And they know they've got an incredible loyal following. They're not going to want to lose that customer. They don't want to lose, potentially, the gentleman and his friends who are flying in from Douala or who are coming in from Beirut, who've been with them, for generations. That is something they don't want to lose. They're going to have to be very, very careful to make sure they don't upset that crowd. But of course, they know that they've got an opportunity, and everyone is waiting, I would say, for the power of Chanel in many ways as a group to do something in the men's space.
Tyler, just a word a little more broadly on the fashion industry. I mean, does this kind of signal that there will be mergers, acquisitions? Is that something that the fashion industry needs right now with a, tricky space of luxury?
I think I think we're entering into a time where there's probably a number of brands, Chris, that are on the block. If you're in a private equity space, I'm sure many people will know, and having conversations with companies that are looking for bigger partners for sure. And of course, like any period of shakeup, I'm sure we're going to also enter into a period where we're going to see some brands also go by the wayside as well.
Tyler, just very finally, while I have you on, I can't resist asking you, yesterday was Canada Day and we had the announcement that Canada is joining Eurovision. Your reaction?
Not surprising. We've only because I think we've been lobbying Ottawa for this for a while. So this was not exactly news. And Monocle, of course, is big Eurovision fans. We've been having some quiet conversations about the cultural importance of this, so it didn't sort of completely surprise us. We know that the conversations had been happening with the CBC. Of course, CBC had to join the European Broadcasting Union to then, of course, become part of this. And this is going to be an amazing sort of soft power story to watch. Amazing that you have a North American broadcaster which becomes part of the EBU. So I think this is one story. Of course, as we look at maybe Canada's slightly economic and sort of cultural decoupling from the United States, and amazing because of course Canada's not too bad at fielding of course musical stars. It's got an interesting pop star array, certainly both past and present. So let's see what happens come Eurovision in May.
Absolutely, and Fernando Augusto Pacheco will have more on this a little bit later in the show. He is also excited. Tyler Brûlé, Monocle's editorial director and chairman, thank you very much for joining us today. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. The time here in London is 12:19. Let's stay in the French fashion space now, though, because while Chanel was busy snapping up one of its most storied brands, the French Parliament this week passed a law to curb the rise of ultra-fast fashion, especially from China. Grace Charlton, Monocle's associate editor for design and fashion, joins me in the studio now. Bonjour, Grace.
Bonjour.
Good to have you. And before we get to the fast fashion, I just wanted to get your take on what Tyler was saying there about this acquisition from Chanel of Charvet. What's your thoughts?
I think it's great. I think it makes sense in terms of like the sort of succession plan for Charvet as well. Chanel, I mean, they're in safe hands with Chanel. It's a house that is incredibly dedicated to artisanal skills and, you know, preserving them. So I think it's good news.
Good news for Chanel. Okay, well, let's move on now to this fast fashion story, the other end, if you will, of fashion. I wanted to start, before we get to the law, just talk about like how prevalent ultra fast fashion is in Paris and elsewhere. I mean, had we reached a sort of critical mass where France had to react?
Well, apparently around 21 million people were visiting these ultra fast fashion websites every day. So it's quite high. And I think what's really interesting is that the way that they're determining what is ultra fast fashion versus just fast fashion is the price of a garment versus the cost of repairing it. So it's not even the quality of the product, it's how it's priced. So I did some investigative journalism, Chris, before coming on air.
I look forward to this.
And I checked. So Zara, not ultra fast fashion, a t-shirt, a white t-shirt will set you back around £16. But if you look at Shein, it's around £5. And then if you go on Temu, it's under £2 to buy a white t-shirt. So this is the thing. Like if your white t-shirt gets a stain on it, you're not going to bother to repair it or try and fit. You'll just buy another one because it's so cheap.
Well, you kind of answered my question in a way, but from your investigative journalism, I mean, well, let's put it this way. There will be some critics that say, oh, you've gone after the Chinese companies here, but you've protected the European fast fashion brands. Is there something to that? Or exactly kind of as you're saying, is there a difference between the fast fashion of Europe and the ultra fast fashion of China?
I think the real difference is the cost of marketing that the European brands are sort of adding on to their products. But obviously this is France. They're incredibly protectionist when it comes to their industry and their economy. So I think it makes sense. Also, another thing that we have to realize is this is only the first step in the direction that the government is trying to take. And they're going to have to change consumer behavior more than companies at this point, which is sort of, you know, interesting in its own way, because are you sort of taxing the poorer in a way that they can't afford? Like, is it the right approach? I don't know. But basically what they're trying to do is change consumer behavior first and gently. And then maybe after that, Zara will follow and these other European companies will follow H&M. But I think they're wary of, you know, the implications on the job market that would have as well. So it's incredibly delicate as a situation. There's a lot of like moving parts and different elements to take into consideration.
It is very delicate. And just tell us then kind of what this law actually tries to do. It's targeting advertising, for example.
Yeah.
What are the elements of it?
So there's a blanket ban on advertising of ultra fast fashion, including with influencers. So a lot of these fast fashion brands, they got famous a few years ago working with influencers who would have promo codes and, you know, show off the new collections. It's also really tied into sort of like reality TV and all of that. I remember in the UK, like Love Island, they got into so much trouble for being sponsored by ultra fast fashion brands, and then they pivoted to eBay. It is like a cultural thing that is sort of under the surface. And another thing they're doing is they're basically taxing different, you know, clothes. So the consumer has to pay for the tax that is going to be added onto clothes from ultra fast fashion brands. And then that tax is going to go to a government-approved organization called Refashion, which is sort of, you know, fighting the environmental cost of fast fashion, which is huge. It's 92 million tons of waste discarded every year into landfill. And it's, you know, I was at Fashion Week last week, and, you know, it's the clothing industry and we're there and it's 40 degrees. Like the sort of connection between the two and the impact that fashion has on the environment felt really raw in that moment. So, yeah.
Well, just finally on that then, Grace, I mean, is this a French thing or do you expect this to move beyond that? There are some questions, of course, whether it's compatible with EU law and all of that, but more generally also just as a concept, do you expect other countries, other places to follow suit on this?
I really hope so. I think as well. Maybe I'm putting too much faith in Gen Z and Gen Alpha, but I think hopefully there will be a backlash and a continuation and like more lobbying efforts, because it's just outrageous. Like we don't need to be buying T-shirts that cost £2 and just churning through them, day in, day out.
There is a middle between ultra fast and fast fashion. Grace Charlton, Associate Editor for Fashion and Design. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Well, that jingle means only one thing. It is time for the Global Countdown now. Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, joins me here in the studio, and we have our special countdown, of course, Faye. But before we get to that, I did ask Tyler, as you heard, I think, in this show already, his take on Eurovision Song Contest getting a new member in Canada. We talked about this on a different show yesterday. You've had like 24 hours to reflect, let this sink in, Faye. What do you think?
I think it's a great decision. It's natural. It makes sense. There's been lots of Eurovision fans in Canada. And one thing that I find interesting, and Tyler would agree with me, that this time they even had political support. Prime Minister Mark Carney, he wanted that. I think he mentioned Eurovision quite a few times in one of his speeches yesterday. And again, they had winners in the past, Celine Dion. And I spoke to Dave Goodman, the head of communications of Eurovision. The interview is coming out tomorrow. It's not just Celine Dion. There's been about a dozen, Canadian artists in previous Eurovision. So it's natural. It feels very natural.
Natural, just to say on that, it's interesting you mentioned that it's like, it's not just Celine Dion. I feel like Canadian musicians maybe fly under the radar sometimes. We almost don't realize that they're Canadian.
They are Canadian sometimes, They sometimes, they're just discreet. They're lovely discreet, the Canadians.
Lovely discreet. Well, let's move on to the Global Countdown, because we do once again have our special. It is round 5 of our World Cup tournament. Take it away, Faye.
Today is the 5th installment. We're looking at the number 1 songs of groups I and J. And first of all, I have to say goodbye to a few countries because they did not have local artists at number 1. And we say goodbye to Iraq, Algeria, Austria. I'm so sorry, Chris. And Jordan. But we have 4 countries remaining. Shall we start with France, Chris?
France, they are the favorites, among the favorites in the sporting world. What about the music?
Will they win that? Well, let's see. Let's play the number 1 song this week by Mauvais Draw with Pilet. Les billets d'argent, Pilet, Michael Jackson a Pilet, elle m'a dit l'entendre il est là, Michael Jackson a Pilet, I mean, it is kind of catchy. And
kind of catchy. It's a tricky beat.
Our producer French, actually, I forgot to ask him, is Pilet slammed? Let's see if we're going to have thumbs up or not. I think it means slammed in French.
Slammed. We're getting a thumbs up from in there.
Fantastic. And this song has been used in quite a few championships, not necessarily the World Cup, but I've seen even in the Turkish championships for some reason.
So it's a sporting song again. This has been a theme of some of our World Cup global countdowns.
And the song has been released last year. That's another trend that we see in the charts. Very old track. Well, not that old, but still. In the past, it would never be like this. A song from last year topping the charts. It's fun. It's very summery. It's a good start.
It's a good start. Let's see where we go from here. Next up, Fernando, we have a country that sadly, well, I shouldn't say so sadly. I partly grew up in Belgium, so I'm quite happy that Belgium beat Senegal. But nonetheless, Senegal is in the musical race.
What a match yesterday, I agree. I mean, poor Senegal, but at least they have some beautiful romantic music. And this song is in Wolof, one of the languages there in Senegal. It's by one of their biggest names. It's Mia Guissé and Vijay with Sama Shul, which means in Wolof, my heart. I can hear your heartbeat, therefore it's ride or die with you. You brought colors to my heart. I mean, even the video is very colorful, it's very romantic.
Colorful, romantic, very sweet.
We need sweet in this world.
We need sweet in this world, don't we, Fernando? Okay, where do we go to next?
Something not so sweet. Well, still interesting though. It's Norway. Of course, there's a football song at number one. And I think the Norwegian fans, they being one of the biggest stars in this year's World Cup.
Yes, the Viking fans and their celebrations.
So, of course, we have a Viking-related song at number one. It's their official kind of football track for the World Cup. It's by Obigerbat and Katastrof with Viking blood. It's the Norway Road chant. Let's have a listen. I mean, they're very passionate. I think
This has absolutely taken over Norway and by extension much of the World Cup.
Well, and that's the lyrics they talk about that. First we took Europe, now we're taking the USA. And I'm quite nervous with Norway because that's the next game with Brazil on Sunday.
That is the next game, Brazil and Norway. Well, we'll see what happens in the football, but we'll also see what happens in the music tournament. One more track for us you have, Faye.
Argentina, they are having a great music scene at the moment. This song has been number one for 7 weeks in a row. It's by an up-and-coming Argentinian musician, Lauta. And this is a remix of the song with Amigo de Artistas. The song is called Puñaladas or Stab Wounds.
Linda arreglada, vos con la almohada pegada, un domingo a la mañana, un sábado por la noche, coleccionando mirada, bailando un toque entonada, vos sos la piba soñada, qué dolor no ser tu hombre, duele como puñaladas.
I mean, I think this cumbia beat, it's quite infectious there as well. And he's a former bricklayer as well, but now he's a massive pop star in Argentina.
Fernando, I feel like you're going to have some dilemmas here because on the one hand, of course, Argentina arch rivals. On the other hand, you love Latin American music.
You know what? as I've been doing every week, I've been extremely impartial here. You know,
completely impartial.
Brazil is out. That's a first. And you know, I also love French music. I love Senegalese music. I do like some Norwegian pop, some Argentinian as well. But you know who is going to win today?
Do I need a drum roll? Who's going to be the winner from these four?
So to join Turkey, South Korea, Cote d'Ivoire and Cape Verde, welcome Argentina to the group.
Argentina!
You are through the final on the 16th of July.
Wow, Argentina favorites, one of the favorites of the World Cup, and now entering the final round of our World Cup tournament global countdown. How do you feel, Faye?
You know, I feel good, and I think I'm the fairest person in this world.
I mean, Argentina is in
Pick
Brazil
Argentina,
is
right?
Out. Oh, I know that was very hard for you. Thank you very much to Fernando Augusto Pacheco, our senior correspondent. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Thomas Waterhouse. Our researcher was Josefina Astrid-Nagler-Gomez, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Termack. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.